Tehg by Marianne Rose Papke. Tehg lived in a circle, or was one anyway, a type of circle known as a dib. Her head was a circle, and her eyes, and from those circles spun tales. She lived in a softly veiled valley of indifference, gleaming with forgotten figments, where the sighs from the subtle slopes beside twinged with Sato songs, telling Tehg of the biblets and bees they knew. There was a bee Tehg knew of on the mountainside, a bee named Botella, who wove fragments of twilight into ribbons of steel. The ribbons ran through the valleys to the sea, and Tehg traced the paths they took every morning. She drifted desultory, as all dibs do, but one day followed the twining lines all the way back to see the bee. The bee lived by herself in a house built from biblets, bibbles of bygone mountain bees. She gave to Tehg a scarf, sonorous with glowing glyphs. They sang a lucent tune, though Tehg had not the means to hear it. She asked the bee where the bubbles came from and why, but Botella she could not say. They shared a sugar strudel, and Botella told to Tehg the tale of the psychopomp's sundering. The tale, it went like so. In the beginning, billions of beings traversed the cosmos, beings of thought and immeasurable power. Two of them went together and watched in wonder as a world was formed and flourished with fauna. They built a world beside the other and stayed to witness until the star succumbed, which happened sooner every time. For all this had happened before, but no one made biblets to remember. Tehg departed deep in thought, pondering the bubbles and biblets gone. The blibs and gibs seen no more. She knew the dibs of places else carried bibbles still, and baubles abundant in every hue. But why? Tehg could not recall. In the winter of softest morning, a silver song seeped in. The notes they told of a ponderous longing and egregious auspice telling. Tehg wrote the words on her book of birch, but they didn't stay there long. The words popped off to bubbles, bright with lavender light. Bubbles of bibbles and baubles blue, and each one held a sound. Sounds of apathy and entropy, and sounds of twilit murmuring. These were all the sounds Tehg had, floating about her head. She watched the passing of the night, and listened for the baying breeze. But it all looped in a circle, and every silver shadow had a sword. The night it started raining, and the droplets cried their bibble bobs to every surface listening. Tehg heard the biblets brought by them, and hoped to catch a few, but the blibs which held the bibbles wobbled when they fell. She watched in helpless wondering, and felt the wandering words, dripped from the dreams of a place unknown. But they soon were lost and washed away, and the gibs they left behind were broken, and could not hold Tehg's sounds. Tehg waited all night long to see what happened next, but the sun rose red like normal, though bigger than before. She watched the circle rise, and watched the circles of her sounds rotate around and round. The bibbles she'd gathered in the night, but could not stick together. She looked to the winding ribbons twirled about the hills, and took the one that led to Bopolis, the city of the dibs. It had been long since she had been, but she knew the dibs would be there. Bopolis rose from the shores of the sea. Bubbles abound in mounds of colors manifold. The dibs here traded bibbles, and built with empty baubles, but as Tehg watched, one popped. She spoke to a dib named Ebo, who carried many sounds, sounds of moments unforgotten, and sounds of lost importance. She once knew a tiny queen, and kept a bubble with her name. But biblets whole? She had none, nor knew how to make them, but she did know why she'd want one. She bartered bubbles with the others, back and forth, day in and out. It seemed a thing they used to do, when the words had purpose. A dib distraught entered town, Otel, who had come from far. He told them all what he had seen, and what he had lost. He'd been at the distant, misted river, following the flowing froth, and catching the bits to bubbles. But this was near that inscrutable spire, and as he'd winding wandered, a wind from the tooth brought knives from the abyss, and all his bubbles were destroyed. A hubbub arose from the gathered dibs. Were all their bibbles and baubles doomed to be stabbed and popped? The tooth of worlds had been louder lately, and the bubbles trembled timorous with every silver suffering. But why, Tehg asked again, did we have them? The bibbles were only single sounds, meaningless spheres to spin in circles. But this was the answer, Ebo said. We have the bibbles to build biblets. It's only the gibs that are missing. Considering this, Tehg turned and saw about her all the circles. Every dib a circle, and the circles about their heads. The buildings built of circles, circling all the dibs. The circle of the sun, large and red in the burning sky. She looked at her circles of sounds from that strangest of songs, and remembered the circle in the tale from the bee. She looked at her scarf and saw that the others could not hear it either, and she remembered the broken gibs she'd seen, fallen in the rain from the world beside. Tehg went alone to the dismal waterway, which wailed in mournful howling, and an unheard hollow screaming rose to deafening as she went. She feared for her floating bubbles, but the song of her scarf tingled the air about her, and soon the white of mist succumbed to the inky void of the mountain tooth. Abstruse presence encompassed Tehg in a place opposite to space. A liminal non-place, but while there, she saw the eaten edges, corrosion at the corners, from countless cosmic cycles crying. Then she was a place again, and not the one she knew. The world was much the same, scorched and dark and cold, but in the air she saw them, gobs of native gibs. She knew she needed many, and it seemed they made a trail. Meandering masses led her to a people human or human-like, such as she had not seen in ages so long she'd forgotten they'd once existed. To these beings she appeared as a ball of light, and to that light the people spoke and told all the stories they knew. Tiny blobs of unseen emotion shed from each person like stars, and Tehg watched in wonder as they collected on her bubbles like dew. She collected every gib, building them to blibs, and strung together the bibbles like beads into proper biblets. The biblets held the message of cycle premonitions from silver shadow screamings. Tehg took the biblets to the tooth and told their story to the time between, to the nothing, the blank, the each and every end of thing. The blibs let go, and the bubbles buoyed up the edges to tell the tale that all this has happened before. And next time Tehg will do the same, and the next. And the biblets will remain, since the biblets aren't real. And they'll be there again next time, and time again and again, remade each time by a dib.